Okay, welcome back. So, Script Junkie, good evening.
How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing great.
Excellent. So, do us a favor. Tell us who you are and what you do.
Definitely. So you'll often find me online as Script Junkie. My name is Matt Weeks. I am leading a small research and development group at Route 9B in the US and came from kind of a mix. I'm sure a lot of people in the industry have hit different areas. I started off in the Air Force doing essentially what they call computer network defense, or essentially blue teaming stuff. Started to move into, I started with forensics and reverse engineering, moved to kind of hunt focus there. After a while of that, I got out of there and came to Route 9B, where I've shifted more towards the research and development side of things. On the side for a long time, especially during the Air Force, I did a lot of open source tool development. So I'm one of the Metasploit developers, although I haven't been super active lately. Have written quite a bit of that and done some of the exploit development as well as core um, development there as well.
Wow.
And now we're focusing on really a lot of different aspects of security, definitely trying to hit all new things. We do things like application security assessment, try to figure out how to exploit a software maybe in use by one of our clients, or other things like that. We also look at how to operational techniques, things like how to avoid detection, how to hide, how to gain access in unusual ways, persist in unusual ways, and how to detect those types of things. And then those can be fed back into Route 9B's security offerings to make sure that we can handle that. So that's kind of where I've come from. I guess a little bit of background on myself.
So I'm gonna drop some docs on Script Junkie here, because I met him in 2015, and you will not find someone that is so humorous as he is. You got a wicked sense of humor, and it really comes out in like Twitter and some of the repartees that we've had in the past. And one of the reasons I wanted you on this event was because you've got a really kind of cool perspective on stuff. I mean, you've seen a lot, you've done a lot, but I'll tell you, if there's one person that will call out bullshit research, I would say it's you.
Yeah, I guess I do kind of enjoy being a little bit of contrarian, and definitely enjoy having fun. And that's the other thing with like Twitter. I tried to, my initial theory was, hey, if I have a serious contribution to the world of information security, I'm going to put an article on my blog or something like that. And then if I have some inane comment, I'll go ahead and throw it on Twitter. And sure enough, that kind of ended up taking over. But yeah, there's a lot of, a lot of different ways that I like doing that. I just love finding ways that are doing things that are what ordinary people don't do, but aren't necessarily forbidden. Just like any good hacker. It's definitely having a lot of.
Do you think that maybe that is kind of like an area that people are trying to take themselves too seriously, that you're seeing people getting wrapped around the axle over password entropy discussions?
Right. Yeah, to some extent, and there's some of that. I don't know if you're directly referencing. I just posted something on that.
No, I was making more fun of John Oppendecker, who is a member of the Beer Farmers, and we have had some drawn out fights about passwords and password managers and all of that.
Right. No, I actually did a little blog post where I just kind of posted, because I saw people talking about this kind of stuff, where I posted basically the script I use, which is just like a little PowerShell double click, and then it'll generate both a phrase and a password, and just talked about kind of, here's the numbers I used, which is why I'm taking this word list and this many words and that kind of stuff, which is basically, hey, if you look at, pick your adversary, right? You could pick the hash rate of the Bitcoin network, and literally billions of dollars have gone into this network, and the total output of that is, and you can tell how many hashes they produce per second. And so then you say, well, okay, if I have, this many input words, do the math and you can figure out how long it would take that to crack it. And if that's not going to crack it, then obviously nothing you're going to face in the real world is going to crack it either. So, one of the things, I don't know if you have like a script list of questions, but I had kind of
we just wanted it to be free flowing. And I know that in you backed away a little bit from social media because basically you started a family, and now you're sort of like coming back into it and being a little bit more vocal. That time, obviously a period of reflection, but how are you seeing sort of the evolution of cybersecurity? Because I mean, you started in the Air Force and now you've gone sort of private sector. How are you feeling about the industry as a whole in 2019?
Right. So, I will say it's kind of interesting in the perspective of we're starting to get more, obviously in the past few years, there's been more political focus, and part of that was a result of the, recent presidential elections and everybody talking about, everybody's starting to see some of the kind of real world impact of things that have been talked about before. And you're also starting to see a few, both in terms of real world significance, but also, you're seeing shifts in terms of, things that are happening in the real world. One of them I wanted to make a point on was the fact that supply chain attacks are really starting to become more and more popular, and people are really starting to realize their power and all that kind of stuff, which I thought was cool because I did a talk on that a few years ago at OpCode in Dubai. And so I just kind of went through, hey, look, you take a look at, there have been a few prior to this, but there's kind of a lot of the impression that you'll get sometimes, especially if you talk with like intel agencies guys at that point in time, was that, oh, well, this is like, a top tier nation state APT technique is to get into somebody's supply chain. And they're talking about, well, you can imagine, do we trust chips from China or something? Well, it's not something you would expect an ordinary guy to do. Fast forward, a little while, and my point then was, hey, look, you have all of, everybody's shifting to these newer programming paradigms where instead of, using a few libraries, manually compiling them, all that kind of stuff, you just have these package managers, and that's the case for Python, Ruby, Go, Rust, all this kind of stuff. And anybody can post to this stuff, and you can install it and run it in just a single command. And and so people are using a whole lot more components from unknown sources, and they're just, kind of searching for them and using it. And it's making your development cycles far faster and more productive. So you're able to do all kinds of cool things, but it has the fertile ground of security attack hadn't really come out then. And so what I did was I ran through a bunch of these scenarios and just went ahead, and since at that point I hadn't seen anybody else doing them except for there was one Python thing that people were talking about. And so I just went ahead and started putting up packages. I put up a package that was I think 3 typoed. So it was the same name as 3 separate, very popular, some of the most popular Python packages in the world, with 1 letter slightly different, right?
Okay.
Which would be an easy typo. And I got hundreds and hundreds of installs from all over, and I didn't do anything malicious, obviously, because I'm not going to.
You didn't want to build a botnet at that.
You don't want to go to prison, right?
Yeah.
Right. I don't want to go to prison, and I don't live in Russia, so I can't just cash out and spin R8 in, the middle of traffic. And
Yeah. I love that splinter pattern that he had on that Lamborghini, though. Come on.
It's pretty cool.
Going to your point, speaking to your point about third-party compromise. We talked earlier with Laurie, who does AppSec, about the things that keep you awake at night, and the things that keep me awake at night are upstream third-party compromise. So when we go and look back in recent history, we go back to, I think, 2017, when Browser Loud was compromised by CoinHive. And that apparently, I think, infected about 4,500 UK websites.
That's right. Yeah.
Including the Information Commissioner's Office.
Yes.
And
Not their finest moment.
exactly right, and that was a innocuous, safe browsing kind of
Right.
designed around people browsing a website that had various different impairments, but it had Monero coin mining going on. And then you look more recently at British
Well,
Airways.
that's just value added right there.
Well, absolutely. But then you look recently at British Airways, who in 2018 got compromised by MageCart. And that led to them losing a hell of a lot
And
of
this
card
is like,
data.
this is 2 lines of JavaScript, which is truly horrifying.
The way I also look at this, right? And I've asked people, I've given a talk on this exact thing. Would you go to any person, random person on the streets and say, hey, here's a text editor, can you edit the code? And would you allow anyone on the street to put in some random code into your system? Everyone will go, no. Well, how is allow be any different to that?
Yeah.
You're literally including someone's code in your system. So scriptjunkie, do you have any recommendations of how people could prevent something like this? Or try reduce the risk?
Right. And so for each one, there's different ways you can do that. Obviously, be extremely careful for some of the things that I was doing. Obviously, be extremely careful that you're typing it in the correct way. Another thing that people do, especially in a lot of these, is they set up something like a virtual environment or something like that. You can, depending on what you're doing, obviously the best thing you can do is to go line by line through your dependencies and make sure there's nothing malicious in that. But you also have to be very clear that you're doing that on the dependency which is actually getting downloaded and run. And there are ways to do that, which is not necessarily the contents of the GitHub repository that they say is the dependency, right? Mm-hmm. And so that's kind of the top tier. Not everybody can do that. Honestly, the best thing that you can do, which is kind of a generic advice, is to minimize your attack surface by simply minimizing the number of dependencies that you're introducing. Do you really need to add a dependency to left pad, for example? Everybody's familiar with the left pad compromise. And the other thing is, if you are publishing these types of packages, you might want to take some effort to kind of insulate yourself. A lot of these, and honestly, if you did want to go to that next step, cross the red line and go even further, is that these make it kind of shockingly easy to figure out. Every one of these packages, they love touting their own stats. Hey, look, this package was downloaded 100 million times. Ruby would do that all the time. And so you're like, oh, all I have to do is compromise who runs this package to get run that many times. Then you go to the package and it would tell you, here are all of the developers of this package. So immediately every single person there who has rights to push that package. And then it would give you like their contact email, like you could email any one of them. And I'm just thinking, this is like, there's a
perfect fish
level of cost benefit there, right? You kind of do want to get your name out there simply from the perspective of, you want to get credit for your work, you want to be able to, collect that raise or whatever. But at the same time, maybe the one that you put out there is kind of a professional, email, and maybe that's not the one that you treat that one with a little bit more suspicion, knowing that, hey, it could be done there. Another thing that you can do is a lot of these have their kind of default method, which any of these developers, if they did get compromised, they just have a key basically stored at a static location, which can then be used to push packages. Oftentimes you can find some advanced setting which will force two-factor authentication, or at least a unique password which isn't stored on your system every time you want to publish a new package. So there's things that you can that you can do from that end as well, from the provider end. And then kind of the last one is just like, don't use the R package libraries, because they I don't know if you saw that part. I basically, by sending an email, and I did this to Debian too, by the way, just basically set up a server which was sitting off a wireless network in my upstairs bedroom. It's just an very old gaming box, and I said, hey, I did the git mirror and everything. I said, hey, can I be a CD mirror? And they said, sure. And I sent it from scriptjunkie.us. Like, this is a total hacker domain. Like, you could have looked up there and be like, all I'm doing is hacking stuff. Sure. So I was on the official Debian mirror distribution. So people just click the link to download the ISOs. Now, you could download the ISOs And then if you wanted to, you could check the MD5 SHA-1, et cetera, against the hash file, but the hash file is also stored on the mirror, right? So
Right.
then you have to check the hash file against the signature file, which signed the hash file, and then you have to check the signature file against the right signature. And the beauty of actually running the mirror myself for a few months there was that I have the access logs, and I can tell you, nobody checks the hash file, nobody checks the signature. Every single one just downloads the ISO and away they go, right? And of course, that could be whatever I wanted to put on there. So that's obviously, you know, if you're talking about getting those types of packages, definitely from one of the old school distribution methods, take the effort to do the hash check and make sure the hash is coming from a trusted location. Oftentimes you can find it on a secure location. And then R was the best or worst, depending on which hat you want to put on today. Because I basically did the same thing, sent them an email, said, hey, I'd like to host a mirror, and set it up, and they have per country mirrors. And the idea was, as long as you are from a location which doesn't have a mirror, sure. And then anytime somebody installs a package, they'll get that mirror list, and it'll be your, you know, name with that country there. And so if you wanted to set one, like there were none in, you know, all kinds of countries I can think are pretty interesting from a perspective, like Iran and all these other kinds of things. So you could just set up one. And the beauty of the R package system was that signatures are not checked. There's a hash list inside with MD5s to verify simply that a package has not been tampered with, but the MD5s are part of the package. And so if you wanted to do something malicious, there's no external sign or anything else checked by that. And so basically I was getting literally tens of thousands of downloads of packages every day that I had that mirror up. And any single one of those, I could have put something malicious in and just massive amounts of stuff. And a lot of people think, well, okay, but that's R. Yeah, but you have to realize what R is. R is the premier, you know, most commonly used data analysis engine. So if you want to get the data, that's go for the data, right?
It's scary. And has anything been done about this?
So I've noticed, I haven't gone back to R. I know for like Python, like they used to, like how I did all, like I went through Tor, set up a burner email, threw it in my registration. They never even checked my email, and then went ahead and uploaded all this kind of stuff. I know Python, at least last I checked, had started verifying those emails. And there's been kind of a lot of discussion on some of the developer, some of the threads on a lot of the package managers in terms of, hey, what can we do against this? And I don't know if a lot of them just don't have a great way of addressing this. And so they're kind of tough, but some of them are adding the capability of doing things like signing packages. And so there's some progress, but when your whole ecosystem, I mean, it's the base protocol, right? You know, it'll take a lot of work. It's not just fixing a bug.
I've looked at most of the popular package managers in the last few months, and none of them are doing anything like signing verification or anything like that by default. Some of them are provided, but they don't do it by default.
Right. Yeah. And that, like Ruby has that as an option, but then none of the top 10 packages were using it, so it was pretty easy to just. And then even lots of ways of just doing that.
But even in the application, most people aren't doing the CSP, and most people aren't doing. In fact, some people are doing CSP, which is great, but nobody is doing SRI. So we're not seeing much use of sub-resource integrity.
Right.
So people aren't hashing the upstream code that they're consuming in their applications. Listen, Script Junkie, we are done, man.
Yeah, it's been fun.
It's been really good. Really enjoyed that.
It's great to touch base with you, Matt, and wish you all the best in 2020, brother.
All right.
Yeah. Thank you for your time. Really, really interesting. Good stuff. Thanks very much. Cheers, man.
Thank you.